Hello everyone and welcome back to another match of the King of Games 92, the tournament in which we brutally tear into games and pit them against each other to see which one comes out alive. I am your host for this episode, Ozzy Garcia, formerly of the Region Free Gamers, and today we are still at the elimination stage for the games fighting to get into the round of 8. And for this match, the contender on the blue corner is none other than the Blue Bomber himself. It is Mega Man 5 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And on the red, scantily clad corner, we have the game that made parents sweat. It is Night Trap for the Sega CD. Your judges, besides yours truly, are Keith Gasper from the Main Quest podcast. And let's give a very warm welcome to Corey Carlson from My Life in Gaming. And with those introductions out of the way, in the immortal words of Marvin Gaye, let's get it on. Hey guys, how are you doing? How's it going? King of Games, really excited about this one. How's it going?
Pretty good. I'm excited about it too. I think that people are probably expecting this to be a bloodbath, but I don't know about that.
I don't know. I mean, it feels like when I saw that Mega Man 5 and Night Trap had made it in, I was like, did I get things wrong? Did I miss something here? Because these are not games that you typically see in all-time best games of all time lists or the like.
It is one of the weirder matchups for sure when I looked at it.
Yeah, but like Mario Paint and some of the other games that made it in there, I think it makes for a very interesting matchup. I think it makes
for sure
for a round where it's not just the same old games that people talk about all the time. Because Mega Man 5, not one of the Mega Mans that first comes to mind when you think of Mega Man. There are like 20 other Mega Mans that come to mind first.
Right,
and
that's right.
And Night Trap is more renowned for its ignominy. It's more notorious and infamous than famous, really. So it's gonna be exciting, guys. But just to recap, we're going to be looking at the games not only in the context of 1992, but also through a modern lens. We're going to kind of take a retrospective look at these games and see how they have fared. And in order to do that, we're going to take a look at 4 criteria. The criteria that each round will make up is first, critical and commercial reception. Second, personal attachment. Third, legacy. And fourth, which of these games would we rather play? Now, one of the titles will take each of those rounds, and depending upon how each game fared, it will inform our final decision of which game should advance to the round of 8. So let's start talking about the games themselves. So, Night Trap. Corey, I think that you're the most qualified person here to talk about Night Trap, considering that you made the documentary on the game. So
that's true, but it's been a little while. It's been a little while since
it's like riding a bicycle. So, Corey, why is Night Trap here? And tell us about why Night Trap is special.
Well, I think that Night Trap is special because of the controversy surrounding it. It was one of 3 games that are responsible for the creation of the ESRB, and at the time it was this. It was a failed experiment, and then it sat on shelves for a few years, and then it finally saw the light of day when, and it was it was something that nobody had really even seen before, and it was like the full motion video was mind blowing for I was 13 years old when it came out, and it just blew my mind that I was watching a movie and I could interact with it, and I probably thought that it was way bigger of a deal than it actually was. But, its legacy is something that has lived on and is certainly talked about a lot more than Mega Man 5 these days. But, it's... And I think that maybe, a lot of people have considered it to be, this terrible game. But I think maybe people have come around on it and said, and just to think, hey, it's really not about the gameplay. It's about, what it did. at the time, which was something that most other games hadn't done, which is, made you feel like you were
Well,
taking
it's
part in
hard.
a movie.
It's hard to put into context, how big of a deal full motion video was for
Hmm.
the younger audiences that are weaned on photorealistic CG graphics. I remember growing up in Cuba when I first saw full motion video. It was like, oh my god, I'm watching a movie. This is freaking amazing. And
Yeah.
when you're going from 8-bit sprites to, oh god, my system, my console, my toy essentially can play movies and I can control them. I think that's pretty impressive when you look back in the context of 1992. So
Yes.
so I think that in that context, Night Trap really deserves to be remembered in a different light. And Night Trap was released in October 15, 1992. It was released for the Sega CD. It was one of the flagship titles for the Sega CD, at least as far as I've seen from my research, because again, you could play a movie. And so there was also Sewer Shark, which was made by the same studio, Digital Pictures. And they also made other FMV games like Corpse Killer and Double Switch. So they were really kind of buying into, the FMV revolution of sorts. But, Night Trap really, as you point out in your documentary, Corey, its origin really dates back to 1987, when,
Right.
it was initiated as part of this Hasbro initiative to create a kind of interactive movie by way of a VCR that you could control the playback of sorts. So, maybe you can give us a little bit more context on that.
Right. So the Nemo was a device that it connects to your TV and it uses a tape and it has 4 different tracks on it, and you can switch between those tracks, which all play back from beginning to end. So there's something happening on each track at the same time. And what's kind of interesting is when I made the documentary, I had access to the original footage, and they were 2 long QuickTime files with 2 of those tracks per QuickTime file. So it's just, you got to see how things kind of fit together and how they would have gone like on the tape.
Okay.
And which is kind of fascinating because like I have no idea how that would have like truly worked. And because the Nemo has never really been seen outside of like the people who were working on creating
Yeah,
it.
and the Nemo was the
is-
machine that was supposed to play this back, and Nemo stands for never ever mention outside. Now, you gotta give it to them. These people should be hired by Washington because they make up really silly acronyms. But that was supposed to be the revolutionary technology, and it seems like
Right.
they had the same thought that we're having now. It's like, how does that actually work through a magnetic media in which you have to rewind and forward? And I just think back to playing, on my VCR using my VHS tapes, and those were finicky pieces of tech. If you recall,
Right.
I mean, it was very easy to get it jumbled. It was very easy for the heads and all that to get dusty and the like. And it's just, I'm thinking back on it, and this must have been, if it ever came to light, one of the most fickle and frail pieces of tech that you could have probably seen.
For
But
sure.
Definitely. It'd probably be more fickle than like the original Xbox 360.
Yeah. I went through 3 of them. But Keith, can you tell us a little bit more about what Night Trap is actually about? What's the story here? What's it like, to experience Night Trap?
Oh man, well, as far as the story goes, it's a bunch of unwittingly teenager. Well, I wouldn't say unwittingly teenagers, but they were hired by a group of. Now I'm blanking on the name of it.
Oh,
Military group.
Scat.
Correct.
Scat.
Yes.
SCAT, yes, because no one checked the dictionary before making up that acronym.
But it's essentially these teenagers that were hired by this military group, SCAT, to investigate this house full of vampires, essentially. And the family that owns the house, are the augurs vampires now, or are they?
So the augurs are basically vampires that are almost dead but not, and they need they're not strong enough to actually like suck blood
Right.
from humans like on their own, so they need to use
Like
a cattle prod,
this
essentially.
drill, like a yeah.
These weird devices
You know, the document
with drills in them.
Yeah, they call. I mean, James Riley, who was the director of the game, called them trocars, which is they go around people's necks and then drill in, and it's drains all the blood out, and then the people who live in the house were taking this blood and bottling it up and probably selling it to their vampire
I hear it was very
friends.
popular in Germany.
But if the concepts of that just sounds incredibly corny and cheesy, it is. They definitely nailed the feel of those very campy 80s, very outdated socially movies, horror movies.
But at the time, like they knew that they didn't really need much
Yeah.
to drive the game. Like being able to participate in this was the thing that people would talk about or care
Right,
about,
right.
and not so much like the overarching story.
Because it's like, you feel like you're doing something that's leaps and bounds, beyond anything else that's being done. So it must have felt like you were part of this Project X of like, oh my God, I am taking part in the revolution of movies. Basically, it was like, this is the next step. We had talkies, and now this is the next step. We're not going to have movies. We're going to have interactions, and we're going to do it all within the comfort of our own homes. Like, that must have been really, really, like, awe-inducing to be part of that.
It feels like kind of I would say almost like an awkward stepping stone into what we would see like somebody like Kojima do with Metal Gear Solid eventually, where it's a much more cinematic experience without having the production of an actual movie.
I would say, even more than Kojima, something more like Shenmue, where you had the QTEs,
Sure,
and you were trying to essentially play a movie. I really do feel like, because of the limited ability to generate gameplay out of video footage, you almost have to always rely on QTEs, and it dates back to Dragon's Lair. So in a way, yes, it was revolutionary, but Dragon's Lair had been doing it for a while, and it's just really, when you think about it, a continuation of that, Spaces and Dragon's Lair. Except now you had, actual live actors doing this. So
and not to take away anything from, Dragon's Lair and Space Ace, but those are very good. I always found them to be way more difficult to play because you basically can't pay attention to what's happening. You just got to look for that flash of your sword, or watch the edges of the screen in your peripheral vision all the time. So it's basically, the first time I played Dragon's Lair at an arcade, like it was over in literally like 8 seconds.
Yeah, I was gonna say the thing that Night Trap has over those earlier games is that those early FMV games were in arcades, whereas this was essentially straight to console.
Yeah.
Right.
But the funny thing about it is that even though it went straight to console, the thing that strikes me about Night Trap is that it's still very much an arcade game. It's still very much about getting a high score, and the high score is how many augurs can you trap. And even at the end, spoiler alert, even at the end, when Dana Plato, who is the star of the game, she's the protagonist, she's the undercover teenager, quote unquote, that infiltrates the group of co-eds or teenagers that go to the mansion. She tells you, you weren't perfect, but maybe next time you can get them all. So clearly there's a wink and a nod to that kind of high score mentality of like, this is our game. This is the game component. You're supposed to catch as many augurs as you can. And the way you do it, just to kind of take a step back for those that haven't seen it, I mean, this whole mansion, you have a bunch of cameras, and you can basically go from camera to camera. And really, I mean, I think, Corey, you pointed out on your documentary, it's very similar to Five Nights at Freddy's, where you're kind of monitoring what's happening. And when you see this augurs, who are this kind of lumbering, silly-looking guys in garbage bags, for lack of a better term, you're supposed to trap them because the house is outfitted with traps. And I think that's also what distinguishes it from something like Dragon's Lair, because when you really start looking at it, the traps are in a set place, so you kind of know where it is that you have to press the button. You don't have to guess necessarily. I mean, yeah, there's a window, but you don't have to guess, like now I have to press left or right, like you would do in Dragon's Lair, for example.
There's a secret passcode that you need to activate the traps as well. So you very much have to pay attention to what the teenagers are doing or what the protagonist is saying.
Yeah.
To get that access code.
And it's different every time you play, so you can't just sit there and be like, oh, I know what this is. You need to know. Well, you learn over time as you play the game over and over again. You learn where the access code changes happen, and you kind of schedule around it. So, it's interesting because, like there's games where you play, like you mentioned Shenmue, where everything kind of happens at set times throughout the day.
Yeah.
And you got to be certain places to witness or take part in certain events. So you're jumping around trying to catch as many of the augurs as you can, but you also have to pay attention to what's happening in the story.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing, is like you play through it and you're trying to capture as many of these as you can, but you're trying to piece together the story at the same time.
And one of the things that, strikes me is that this is a game that kind of did that asymmetric storytelling that would be done in other games later on. I mean, the one I'm thinking about is, what's it called? The Last Express. It was that game that was done, that was rotoscoped. It was made by, I think it was the guy that did Flashback or Another World, one of those two. I think Another World, actually. And, that idea of like, you can't really see the full story in your first playthrough, because you're always seeing different sides and different angles of what's happening on a continuous timeline. You can't circle back to an earlier time. And I think that's like, it's very experimental and it's very interesting. But that's not the reason why we're here, though. I mean, the whole reason why we're here is, because this game became notorious. And,
exactly.
Why did it become notorious, Corey?
Because of one specific scene where a girl in a nightie gets,
she gets got.
Her neck drilled and she gets killed. Yeah, she gets got, and you look at it now and it seems like it's like nothing. It's like, I can't believe this was made, that they made such a big deal about this. And I think that most people who even played at the time probably didn't think anything of it either. I mean, you probably see, you saw more violent stuff probably on like regular cable,
or even like Ren and Stimpy,
or even on prior video games as well. Stuff like Bionic Commando, where Hitler's face is like melting off.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that like it just became this. I think that Congress tried to draw attention to it, to be like saying like, "Hey, look at how bad this is," and I think they're kind of expecting everyone to say like, "Yeah," just like agreeing with them without even like thinking about what they're actually saying. It's ridiculous looking back on it, but it was important at the time.
Yeah.
It has become more important.
Yeah,
over time.
I could rephrase it as the whole reason why this game is notorious is because Joe Lieberman never played a video game. That's probably down to it. I mean, it kind of reminds me of that one congressional hearing a few years ago where I think it was Jeff Zuckerberg was being interviewed for one of the congressional hearings, and just the congresspersons just didn't know how the internet worked, essentially. And it was one of those cringe-worthy takes that you realize, oh my god, these people are just very, very out of touch. But it did lead, the whole congressional hoopla did eventually lead to the creation of the Electronic Software Ratings Board. So there's that. And eventually the game was re-released again, and it was released with a rating, so on and so forth. And it just, between this and Mortal Kombat, those were the games that were the poster children for, this is why we need to protect our children, this is why we need some sort of safeguards in order to not get this into the hands of children.
Right.
And that's kind of why we're here today talking about Night Trap. But let's switch over to the blue corner. On the blue corner, we have Mega Man. So, Keith, Mega Man 5. Tell us a little bit about Mega Man 5.
Well, I mean, if you've played any other Mega Man, you kind of know what Mega Man 5 is. It's about a little blue boy robot created by a genius doctor, Dr. Light.
With a beautiful beard.
Absolutely great head of silver hair as well.
Maybe the best beard in video games.
Yeah, top 5, I would say. Definitely top 5. It's kind of up there with, the guy in the cover of Phalanx. In terms of all-time great beards.
I know Chris is listening to, not to go off the rails here a little bit. I know Chris is listening to this, so top 5 beards in video games. Make it happen. All right.
Make it happen. I mean, so Mega Man, it's basically Osamu Tezuka's Astro Boy as created by Santa Claus. No. In all seriousness, I mean, Mega Man is, the template was set forth in 1987, the first Mega Man. Essentially, you're the little blue robot, and you had to go up against, 8 other robots created by Dr. Wily, who is the big bad guy. The original game, if I recall correctly, only had 6 robots, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, Mega Man 2 kind of really set the template, so by the time that Mega Man 5 arrives, like, it's almost, the amount of times that they've done this now, it's almost to the point of parody. Because it's kind of like, oh god, Dr. Light is taken hostage again, and oh my god, it's Proto Man that's doing it. Who could it be? How could he do this? And it's kind of like everyone's just like, yeah. We all know, like, it's Dr. Wily behind it all. It's kind of like that whole Scooby-Doo thing. Like, if it wasn't for you all, rascally children, it's all like, at the end of it all, it's gonna be the same old guy, behind it all. So, so yeah, I mean, Mega Man 5, when you take a look at 1992, it's kind of like, it wasn't even the only Mega Man game released in 1992. So again, it's almost to the point of parody that, that this game, kind of was on its 5th iteration in like 5 years. We talk about Call of Duty nowadays having a lot of entries, but really Mega Man was kind of up there. But there is something, though. I mean, Mega Man, even on his worst days, is still a damn good time. I mean, unless you're talking about Mega Man X7. Sure. I mean, that's an entirely different story. But the original 6 Mega Mans, I mean, I would say, some are weaker than others, certainly. But I don't think there's a bad game in that batch. And Mega Man 5 certainly fits that mold. So Corey, Mega Man, I mean, did you play this originally? You were 13 at the time. I mean, what
I didn't play this. So I played the first one. I played the second one, and third one I played, and then after that I just kind of fell off because after the third one it started coming out every year, and it's the same reason why, like, I just didn't feel like playing like an Assassin's Creed every year. It's just too much, and you need some time to, just, you need a break to come back and enjoy it. And, like by that time, I was all in, with my Genesis and, Super NES and, and the Sega CD was out. Yeah. Like, there's just like very little chance I was going to play anything on the NES at that point.
Yeah, it was a very late release for the NES. I mean, not quite the latest, but certainly, less than 2 years out before the NES would be effectively dead.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you guys compare it to more modern titles like Call of Duty and Assassin's Creed, and it totally makes sense when you talk about it. Because I didn't come to Mega Man 5 until I think I probably had it when I was a kid, but as we've kind of already discussed, like, a lot of the Mega Man games just kind of blend together after Mega Man 2. So
yes, I totally agree.
I'm a
totally
big
agree.
Mega Man 3 fan, but I get your point. So.
Mega Man 1 is my favorite, but but 2 is is pretty great as well. And then after 2, once they started like adding like more to the gameplay, like once the slide was introduced or like Rush was introduced, I was like, like there's
always been these.
Now they need to make it more more complicated.
Keith, I know you're gonna appreciate this, but Mega Man 1 was the Dark Souls of Mega Man. So
Yeah, I've got some hot takes on that. Now I don't even know if I want to drop that. I was saving that for later, but
no. No, I just wanted to tweak you based on your last episode. But yeah, I mean, it's a franchise that I think benefits now a little bit more than it did at the time, because now we can kind of take a look at each game based on its own individual merits, and without the fact that you have this burnout in play, which again, I think it makes this, playing around very intriguing, because a Mega Man game on its worst day is a really good game, So it released in 1992. It released in Japan on December 4, 1992, and it squeaked into North America on December 29th, 1992. So it just kind of made it in. I mean, right after Christmas. So Capcom, what were you thinking, man?
Well, I mean, that probably plays a big part on why it's probably the most expensive original series. It's an expensive game, because I don't think it's sold very well.
I think 5 is. I mean, even more than 6, even though 6 was even a later release. It's one that, to be honest, I have never seen in person. Like, I've never seen Mega Man 5 out and about. And it's just, it's a really, it's a really big shame. I actually prefer it to Mega Man 6, to be honest, but but you could kind of tell that Capcom was kind of running out of steam at this point. At least the Capcom studio that shepherded this original series, because they basically outsourced all the robot masters to the public. They were like, guys, hey, what a great idea! You can design the robot masters for us. So they basically outsourced it to a bunch of 7-year-old kids.
Yeah, but I mean, imagine being one of the kids who created one of the robots that made it into the game.
And then find out Capcom completely redesigned it, and it nothing originally intended. But
to be fair, the original had a lot more penises. So.
I was just going to say, well, kids can't draw anyway, so it doesn't matter.
So yeah, I mean, and you can tell in the names, the A bosses are Starman, Gravity Man, Gyro Man, Crystal Man, Napalm Man, Stone Man, Charge Man, and Wave Man. And by the way, I like to affectionately call this game the Little Blue Bomber Goes to Nam, because you have Napalm Man, and really, the stage is basically Vietnam. I mean, Platoon had come out a few years earlier. There were all these Vietnam movies. I like to think that Capcom was like, let's just throw him in Nam.
And are we sure it's pronounced Gyro Man and not Euro Man?
That would be great if it was, but
if it was Gyro Man,
it's like a
yeah.
He's just wrapped in a pita. That's what I want. I would play that game. I probably would have bought that at day one if I knew that was the character in it. Although, at the time I probably didn't even know what a Euro was.
Yeah, but there probably would have been a lot more cultural insensitivity, depictions with the Euro Man, to be fair. But it was produced by Takuro Fujiwara. He's actually one of the main guys at Capcom at the time. He did Ghosts and Goblins, and just an absolute legend.
He's the man.
Yeah, Bionic Commando. He's Keiji Inafune, he's a big marketer, so he's the one that got all the recognition. But Fujiwara, man, I mean, that guy is absolutely legendary. He went on to do Whoopee Camp, so he did the Tamba series, which, not a lot of people know. But yeah, he's, I gotta give him props. He was in Capcom still at this time, so he was still doing good work there. And it was directed by...
And he just recently did the Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection.
Yeah.
Which was, I felt was excellent. It's really, really tough, and I think a lot of people crapped on it because of that. But I thought it was.
I did not crap on it, but it's very tough, and I suck at it. But it's a lot of fun, though.
Well, I also think that people had an issue with the art style. I kind of dig it. I dig the art style.
Oh, see, I loved it. It looked kind of like
a stained glass window type thing. Yeah.
Really unique. I heard that game pushes. It uses the RE engine. I heard it pushes the engine harder than Resident Evil 8.
I want Capcom to just throw the RE engine on everything. Just throw it on absolutely everything you can get your hands on. Marvel vs. Capcom, Street Fighter. Just why use Unreal when you have the RE engine? I love it. I love the look.
It's true.
The one thing I want to talk about with Mega Man 5 as far as like its development goes that kind of makes me happy about this game, and I guess I should preface I don't know much about the development of Mega Man 4, but I know Mega Man 3's development was absolutely abysmal.
Yeah.
And reading some of the articles coming into this of how Inafune spoke about the development of Mega Man 5, saying that it was probably one of the most fun experiences he had making a game. Just, in hindsight, having played Mega Man 5, and I might be giving a little bit away, just makes it a lot breezier of an experience to play, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's one of the easiest games. It's actually the only Mega Man. No, not the only one. I beat Mega Man 3, but it was the first Mega Man game I ever beat, and that's not by coincidence. I really do think it's one of the easier games. I think they really took a hard look at the design, and they wanted to make it accessible to gamers. It's not that they were intentionally trying to make it easy, but they instilled some quality of life improvements in the design that I think makes it an overall more enjoyable experience if you're just trying to not hate yourself. Which, not that you would hate yourself unless you're playing Mega Man 1. But Corey, I'm not gonna discriminate.
Capcom got rid of all the dachshunds that programmed Mega Man 1 and they actually got real people and video game designers.
Yeah. And the other thing is that when one of those design concessions was the introduction of Beat, which was a bird that you could get, and it would make the second half gauntlet of robots a lot easier. If you're able to get this this bird, this mechanical bird, it basically acts like as a homing laser, essentially. I mean, this bird will take down anyone in its path. And it makes it a lot more easier. So it makes it so that you can kind of scale your difficulty. So I go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's kind of a genius move by Capcom, because whether it was ever intended or not, the Mega Man games are very much about exploring each stage. And a lot of new players just might not do that.
Yeah.
But in order to obtain Beat, you have to go on a small little collectathon. So you might just happen upon one of the letters. You have to spell out Mega Man 5 in order to unlock Beat. So you might come across the A just sitting out in the open, and you're wondering, what the heck is this about? And then, you see the start menu, and it's there. It's present. You can see it. You collected it.
Yeah.
And that's just telling you right away, oh, I need to actually be looking for these things because something is going to happen. And I think that is a genius move by them, because they never really, there are the E-tanks and stuff that you could collect before, but that's just something you could totally just beat I don't know what I'm saying anymore. You can go ahead, Corey. You wanted to say something.
It's interesting because, you point out that exploration, and I'm pretty sure you can return to levels to find this stuff too. And it really makes me think about, I wonder how much of an influence that design had on the overall influence of the Mega Man X games. Because Mega Man X was very much about exploring and, going to already finished levels and using weapons to open up passageways and see what you find. And that's some of my fondest memories of gaming during that time is, finding all the stuff in all the enhancements in Mega Man X just on my own without any kind of internet or anything like that. And I would just, try different things.
Yeah.
So I wonder if Mega Man 5, gave them an idea to try to do that stuff, or they got that idea from the already in development Mega Man.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering whether it was just some parallel tracks, whether the Mega Man X team was working alongside the Mega Man 5 team. I don't even know if they even got along. Who the hell knows? But it might have been a result of, I don't know, evolutionary convergence. They both just reached the same decision, or it might be that they took it from some other game that it was in common to both of them. But I do think it is kind of a very intuitive way of making the game a little bit simpler, for players that need that extra bit of help. And also just to, as Keith says, to get to explore the level a little bit more thoroughly. But with that said, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to go back into each category, and we'll see how each of these games fare. Alright everyone, and we are back, and now it's the moment of truth, when we pit them against each other, and we look at each criteria and see which one comes out on top. So I'm actually gonna just twist things up a bit. Hopefully Chris doesn't kill me. I'm gonna go with personal attachment first as a criteria, because I do feel like we've already kind of touched upon it a little bit, and it makes sense to just kind of segue from that into what each of these games mean for us. So let's start with you, Corey. What does Mega Man and what does Night Trap mean for you? I mean, what kind of personal attachment do you have to either of these games?
Well, I definitely have a lot of personal attachment to Night Trap, and like as I said earlier, I was 13 years old when it came out, and which I feel is like the age to be when that released, because I was just kind of discovering like late night HBO or maybe USA Up All Night, and just like these B movies and stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We all get the picture, Corey. We all got the picture.
Well, but like at the time, it's like, you got this idea of like I didn't even think it was that bad, and I didn't realize that it was considered to be that bad till everything like blew up with it,
Yeah.
And but it still kind of felt like, oh, this is like maybe something like that I shouldn't be playing, but like my mom doesn't know, what I'm playing, because it was just not something. I mean, I always joke about how like my dad took me to see RoboCop in the theater when I was 7.
Oh my God.
And this is like, I mean, Night Trap is like, nobody's going to make a big deal about this,
Let me tell you, Corey, the acid pool scene still scars me to this day. I was never the same child after that scene. I saw RoboCop when I was 8.
The acid scene, the acid scene seems to be like everyone, like a lot of people's favorite scene. It was like a friend of mine and myself. We had an ongoing thing about that scene, because it comes out as like, help me, and like he gets hit and he like gets turned into like essentially just like liquid.
Yeah.
When he gets hit by the car, and like I even brought it up like, I was the best man in his wedding. I like brought it up during that.
Great time.
And then like recently, I think I was talking to Joe Redifer from GameSack, and he's like, we were talking about RoboCop, and he's like, yeah, that scene where the guy gets like knocked into the big thing of toxic waste. And we were just like talking about how like that seems to be the most memorable part of the movie.
Absolutely. Like everyone forgets that I forgot the name of the guy that the cop that actually becomes RoboCop. We forget that he was like blasted to smithereens in the beginning. Everything that everyone remembers is just that guy getting melted because he was dumped in toxic waste.
Yeah, I didn't see RoboCop until like my mid-20s, and even then I was like, they showed this in movie theaters?
Yeah, well, it's crazy. I mean, it's like it was going to be rated X, and they had to like cut, like they had to edit frames like out so that it like didn't show, like when he gets his hand shot off,
but
like that, they probably had to trim like 3 frames off of that so that it was just quick enough.
But Corey, it almost feels like it's a conflict of interest for you to be in here, because you're so intertwined with Night Trap in a way.
And like I am definitely biased, because getting to be involved to some extent on like the remaster of that, and is just like it's kind of mind blowing. I always like to say, like, if I could go back and tell myself when I was 13 years old that like I would get to do something that was in the game, that was like in like a new version of it, it's just like blows my mind. And I think about the production of that documentary and how it was like maybe like my favorite thing that we've done on the YouTube channel. And I think about like how it could have been like even more of a bigger thing. And I think at the time when we were like asking like who we could talk to interview for that documentary, like a lot of people thought like, oh, this is just gonna be like another hit piece on the game. Like I don't want to be a part of this. And then I think once these people saw it, and it's like actually like, we're essentially like the entire point of the documentary is like, people, crap on this game a whole bunch, but like actually it's pretty cool what it did at the time. And, it's like probably a lot better than it's given credit for.
Yeah. And what about Mega Man? I mean, is there any kind of personal attachment you have to it?
To Mega Man 5, I have zero attachment to Mega Man 5. I can play Mega Man 1 and 2 over and over and over again, and Mega Man X1 over and over again. But, like outside of that, I'm definitely like I'll play it once and then I'm done. Like Mega, it's I feel the same way about like a lot of Mega Man games as I do about Star Wars movies. Like anything Star Wars related after the original trilogy.
Yeah.
Like I'll watch it or enjoy it one time and then
You never have to see it again.
I don't feel compelled to.
So I guess
it.
does that tip your hand as to what way you're going on this particular criteria?
Yeah, I mean, I can't not pick Night Trap.
Man, that was a hard decision.
I
for
have
you.
to. I know, and that's like sometimes I think one of the reasons it's even in this is because I'll go to that Night Trap.
I love it. Keith, what's up with you now? What do you think? What personal attachment do you have to either of these games?
Man, so this is where it gets awkward because I have no real personal attachment to either of these games.
Which I love, because it forces you to be creative.
So, like I said, I grew up playing the first 3 games. And beyond that, if I had any of the other ones in the house, it's just kind of a blur because they just blend together. So I'm going to kind of just be completely biased and give it to Mega Man here because of a lot of the reasons that we already kind of talked about as far as the histories of the game go. I enjoy the franchise as a whole, not just the mainline Mega Man series. I enjoy Legends and the X series and so on. And as far as Mega Man 5 goes, I replayed all of, at the time, 10 mainline games back to back as an adult, and I got to play 5, obviously, one of those, and it's in comparison to the first 4, we already talked about how easy that game was, and it is super easy. And coincidentally, I came back to it in January or February of this year without even knowing I was going to be a part of this panel at all. And I enjoyed it just as much as any other numbered Mega Man experience. So as far as Night Trap goes, the first time I ever played it was before recording with you guys. So I can't say I really have too much attachment to Night Trap other than I just knew of its existence my entire life, but never actually had any real hands-on experience with it. So for me, it's Mega Man 5.
All right, so that's 1-1. So I guess that leaves me. Personal attachment. I mean, look, I'd known Night Trap ever since I saw, I think, an article by Sean Baby on EGM about the worst games of all time. So that must have been I don't know, 2001, maybe 2002. So I've known this game by its reputation for a very long time. But I never owned a Sega CD. I really did not play an FMV game until very late, in my life. So really, I have not had, I did not have the pleasure of playing the game growing up. Whereas with Mega Man, I mean, I did actually end up playing the game. It was actually the first Mega Man I ended up beating. And I had a blast with it. So I don't know. I mean, for me, it's a little bit awkward because I've seen, Night Trap throughout my life, and it's just kind of always been there looming in the background. But it's just Mega Man to me. It's just the fact that it even blends with all the other games means that there's a baseline level of quality, which means that it just kind of gets lumped into the miasma of just Mega Man is, its own kind of cultural entity. And that makes it, give it a little bit more of a personal attachment to me. So I'm going to go with Mega Man. So that's 2-1. Mega Man takes the first round, but Night Trap is still in it. We're just getting started. So let's go to commercial and critical reception. So one of the things that really surprised me as to both of these games when I was doing research is that they both got better reviews than I expected. if you look at Night Trap
Mm-hmm.
and you look at it with the meme kind of approach that has been taken to it, at least before Corey came out with the documentary, I think people expect a game that was always poorly received and that was always seen as one of the worst of all times. And going back to, for example, EGM, it didn't get bad scores. It got middling scores and even one score that was pretty good, but it didn't get terrible scores. So, it wasn't this catastrophe or absolute train wreck that people are making it out to be. There was actual real excitement about Night Trap when it came out.
There wasn't really anything like it, and it was like kind of mind-blowing at the time. And I think that with the amount of FMV games that followed, people would look back on Night Trap and just kind of lump it in with all those. But maybe it's not the most robust FMV game. They did a lot more with later ones, but I still think it's the best FMV game.
Well, I mean, the most iconic at the very least.
And I'll say again, it also had that leg up on the fact that it was coming out on a console. I don't know how well the Sega CD sold. I don't think it did very well. But again, I mean, it was like this new technology at the height of, FMV technology or that type of game. And you're going to be able to play it at home, not in an arcade losing your money or anything like that.
Yeah, so for example, EGM reviews averaged a 6 out of 10, and GamePro even gave the game a near perfect 19 out of 20, which is kind of crazy. And then the other scores just kind of range, 71% from computer and video games. Sega Zone, which was a Sega magazine, gave it a 58%, but really where the criticism went was just because of the limited gameplay and also the fact that you were counting on a very limited color palette on the Sega Genesis, which, fundamentally the Sega CD was still a Sega Genesis under the hood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it made, the video very grainy. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate from the remastered version that came out, that the fact that you were able to clean up the video and be able to see it as it was originally intended. I think it's completely invaluable, because really it suffered from being on a platform that was really not as capable as you wanted it to be. But it still received pretty decent scores. In terms of commercial reception, I mean, I didn't find much data. I did see from a source that it had sold 130,000 copies before the controversy kind of, completely blew up. But I don't really know how much it sold. My impression is that it probably didn't sell too well. So Corey, I don't know if you found any other data, kind of indicating that.
Yeah, it's hard to say, especially with how the Sega CD was selling at the time as well, because it just didn't. My friends, I had like one other friend who had a Sega CD, and myself were the only people like in our entire school that had one, I guess.
And you guys were seen as the rich kids, I guess.
No, I mean we were the only ones that cared enough, I think, about games at the time.
Yeah. No, you weren't.
Important.
You didn't have the Neo Geo, so you guys weren't the rich kids.
No. But I mean, I can't imagine it sold well, like at first. But the controversy definitely, like, made it sell like way more than it.
Well, and you also had the fact that it was pulled off the shelves by Sega because they finally capitulated to public opinion, and then it was re-released by the studio that developed it. You had to wonder how much did it sell, on that re-release. But then it was also released on the 3DO, and it was also released on the Jaguar. Am I correct, Corey? Or
no, it's on the
32X. Yeah, the 32X.
And PC.
Yeah, and PC. So it was released on other consoles. So at least it was successful enough to cover the cost of porting to another console, I would say.
I did read something, and this was obviously after the entire congressional hearing and it being re-released, so it's not in that 1992 ballpark, but it did seemingly sell near the million mark, I read. So
I guess that would make sense. Like across all the different versions, or
I would assume so, yes.
Yeah, which would make for a pretty decent, not a huge overwhelming hit, but for
No.
the time a pretty decent sales, really.
And to be completely honest, Digital Pictures probably coasted on that.
Oh yeah,
Like it helped fund like everything else that they ended up doing, because I don't think that anything else that they did. I mean, Sewer Shark might have come close, but that's because that was a launch window game as well.
yeah.
And I mean, they probably just kept on making money from Night Trap, and that's what allowed them to do the other
Yeah.
ones. Because I don't think anything else even sold remotely as
Yeah.
close to as
And
well,
going
as well.
over to Mega Man, I mean, again, I had assumed that because this game, had come out at a time when people were over the NES and it was kind of lumped in the late era original NES Mega Man games, that it would have gotten sort of like a middling reception as well. But it actually received pretty good scores. And really, it would range from like 6 to 8, but really on the higher end of that. So, EGM averaged a 7.75, and really, a big reason for that is because someone gave it a 6 just because they wanted a 16-bit Mega Man and not an 8-bit Mega Man. So you kind of do have to wonder how much of the bias of the time, the fact that people wanted something else was really affecting the scores that the game was receiving, but it still did pretty well. I mean, Game Informer gave it a 7.75, and GamePro gave it a 4.5. Famitsu had kind of the lowest scores with a 23 out of 40, which, I don't know. I can't rely on Famitsu. Like, Famitsu's so all over the place that it's just kind of like, to me, they're just throwing numbers out there. But, the surprising thing is that it actually sold pretty decently. I mean, I saw that based on VG charts that it sold 790,000 copies. Now, I don't know whether that's reliable, but that's a pretty good number. And it kind of flies against the face of, the fact that this is one of the most expensive games on the NES. Because if there is less supply out there, then, it makes sense that it would be more expensive. But if it sold 790,000 copies, then there could be one of two things. People are either keeping it and not selling it, or this number is actually not quite accurate. So I don't know which of those two it is, but that's the number I kind of have. But there definitely was a feeling of market saturation, when you take a look at Mega Man 5.
Right.
So Keith, I'm going to start with you this time. What do you think about critical and commercial reception as between these two games, and which one would you give the nod to?
Oh boy. So this is tough, and I might pull a little bit of a Chris Coplain here. So if you look at the hard numbers of 1992, Mega Man wins it, right? And in that case, I could be like, yeah, sure, it's obvious who should win here. But then you kind of bring up the fact at the time that nobody kind of really cared about either one of these games. Like, they reviewed okay, but also people were kind of wanting a little bit more from both of them. Mega Man was competing with Mega Man X being right around the corner, so it's kind of its own competition. And nobody really knew what Night Trap was until it got in trouble, right? So
yeah, unless you're
Corey with a Sega CD.
Right, yeah, exactly. And then, but I think because of those congressional hearings, everybody just kind of put their foots in their mouth, and then the sales for Night Trap, as we kind of already talked about, skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm dipping into legacy here. I kind of feel like this matchup is kind of like the battle of like the quote unquote forgotten video games.
This is the games that people don't really care about.
And the
It's just, like they're not selling systems.
Right.
Neither one of them were selling systems.
Exactly.
At the time.
Yeah. And really the only reason why anyone remembers Night Trap is because of its controversy, right? So
yeah,
because nobody remembers Double Switch, really. I mean, or any of the other.
I mean, there's some people that do, but like that. And that's Double Switch is more interesting because of the people that are in it.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, it has Corey Haim, I think it's one of the lead actors.
Yes, Deborah Harry from Blondie.
Oh, really? Yeah,
well,
yeah. And
which is, I think,
Arlie
is
Ermy is also there. I mean, the guy that did
Yeah.
Full Metal Jacket. Yeah. But Keith, no more dawdling on.
Yeah, so essentially because of old, out of touch white people bump the sales of Night Trap, I think I'm going to give this category to Night Trap. I don't think people are buying these Mega Man Legacy collections or the various bundles for Mega Man 5 alone, but people certainly bought the Night Trap remaster all these years later. So
Yes.
I'm giving this one to Night Trap.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point.
Yeah.
I mean,
Corey, go ahead.
like it would be very interesting to see what the sales numbers were like for like the virtual console release of Mega Man 5.
Yeah.
Like, are people like buying it on virtual console? Because that is like something I never even thought of, is that, you know, a lot of people bought the remaster and they continue to buy it like as it gets re-released. And I'm sure that when the PS5 version comes out, a bunch of people are gonna buy it again. And I mean that could come down to, you know, like people buying it from limited run as well, you know. But, you know, I don't think that people are buying, you know, like you said, Mega Man Legacy Collection so they can play Mega Man 5. Although when you think about it, it probably is a lot cheaper for a lot of people to buy that instead of, you know, getting a cartridge for $150 or something.
Sure.
Yeah. So what do you think, Corey? Commercial critical reception.
Yeah, I mean, at their release, like neither of these games were like setting the world on fire, and like the thing with Mega Man 5 is it's just like a really solid game. Like, it's just, you know, it doesn't do anything crazy or different that, you know, previous games had done. But it's just, you know, it's just a really good game, and people were buying it based on, you know, I had fun with these previous games.
Yep.
And you know, I think, you know, people that bought Night Trap were probably like what is this? Like, how can this possibly be real?
Yeah.
I don't like I you know, there was a point where I was thinking like, you know, I might just go with Mega Man here, but I think that I've been convinced to go with Night Trap.
Look, I mean, I think that those are very fair points. I do think that commercially, I think that Mega Man, you know, holds up well. I do wish that we had more concrete numbers to count on. I do also think that the fact that it's so rare on the NES kind of really is a good indicator of the game not selling as well as, you know, we probably wished it would have. So, you know, I don't think that Mega Man 5 necessarily gets the edge compared to Night Trap, because I do think that Night Trap ended up continuing to fund Digital Pictures and, you know, being able to be ported and having other titles being released. So, you know, it really had a critical reception to, you know, a commercial reception to speak of. And even if that was kind of attributed to the controversy, it still had a, you know, a good commercial reception. You know, like, you know, even bad publicity is good publicity. And I think Night Trap really, you know, reaps, you know, the benefits of that. And on critical reception, I really think that this is kind of a case of, you know, the tallest little person. You know, which one of these, you know, do you give the nod to when they were kind of so closely intertwined? I do think that, you know, the fact that retrospectively Night Trap was seen as one of the worst games of all time kind of gives it a little bit of a knock against it. But as we've seen, that's probably most likely a little bit of a clickbaity approach that magazines were taking at the time.
Yes,
sure.
So I'm not necessarily going to give, you know, much credence to that. But, you know, ultimately, I think that Mega Man, you know, just by virtue of it being part of a series that was so well regarded and that had such, you know, basic solid foundations to rely upon, I think it was better received. I think that if you were a kid in 1992 and got Mega Man, I think you would have been very, you know, you would have very much enjoyed, you know, your time with it. Whereas with Night Trap, I don't know if that would have been the case. So looking at it, you know, from the perspective of 1992, I think, you know, the critical reception of Mega Man kind of makes me give it the edge. because I just don't think that it's very fair or easy to compare, the commercial reception of either of those. So I'm going to give it to Mega Man, but honestly, it could have just as well been Night Trap. At the end of the day, Night Trap still takes it 2-1. So that means that we're now 1-1. We're tied up. So that means that it's a whole new ball game again. So let's talk the one that we have wanted to talk all along about, and that's Legacy. What legacy do each of these games hold, and how does it compare to the other? So, Corey, what do you think, this category should go to?
Well, I think that Legacy is really on the side of Night Trap because of like the congressional hearings. Like there is no way that people will not think of that, or think about Congress talking about video game violence. Like Night Trap will always be mentioned in that, and I think that people probably have maybe changed their mind on it in recent years. I mean, that's just anecdotal, based on people I've talked to.
I mean, and also the fact that it was re-released with a T rating instead of an M.
Exactly. But I mean, I think you talk about at the time it was like, oh, the worst game of all time, and you look at that now and it's like that's I can get a lot more enjoyment out of this than probably 90% of the games I see on the eShop.
Yeah.
So, but Mega Man's legacy is, his legacy is being part of the legacy collection.
Yeah.
I guess
it's kind of being the legacy is what was built up by the earlier games, essentially. It's
right.
You have to wonder how much does Mega Man 5 really add to that legacy, other than just adding to a general sense of burnout.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, the first three are the ones that people are always going to mention, and I'm sure that the first three are most people's favorites. Probably like 2 and 3. Like one of those two, people would say those are the best ones.
But
and
with respect to legacy, though, I mean,
do
you think? For example, when you take a look at the best-selling games of 2021, for example, most of those games are M-rated games. So does the ESRB even matter anymore? And I'm just
definitely
kind of playing devil's advocate here. So does that undercut or undermine Night Trap's legacy, the fact that what it helped build is now essentially irrelevant?
Maybe. I think that it's probably just being whenever somebody looks at a game cover, they're always going to look at the rating, whether or not it means anything to them. They will always think about what this game is rated.
Yeah, like an M-rated game for a kid is like, buy this right now.
I wonder if that's even people even think about that. Like most kids probably don't. I mean, I think about it with I have 2 kids that are young enough where I think about I don't know if I really want you to play this.
How many teenagers are stopping kids at the 13-year-olds at the counter and be like, I don't think you should play this.
Yeah, I mean it's for the parents essentially. Parents that the parents that don't take their kids to see RoboCop. I guess.
And to be fair, it's better to have an ESRB rating than not. I do think it's better to have something.
Sure. Yeah, well, I don't think they can. They can't even do it. I know the limited run, they didn't have to do it at first, but I think that they got in trouble after a while and they were forced to do it.
Yeah. But Corey, what do you think? Who do you give the nod to here?
I'm gonna go Night Trap because I think that people probably think about it more than Mega Man 5. Mega Man 5 just it's just Mega Man 5.
Just there.
It's just another Mega Man game.
All right, Keith.
That most people probably wouldn't pick as their
Keith,
favorite.
Tell us.
Shit.
Do you feel dirty? Do you feel dirty thinking about, giving this round to Night Trap?
Again, this is the battle of the forgotten games.
Yeah.
This is tough because without the congressional hearings, Night Trap doesn't really have a legacy. And to be fair, Mega Man 5 itself, as games, they don't really have a legacy. So, hear me out. Here we go.
Go for it. That's why we're here.
This is where I make enemies, I think. So yeah, absolutely, Night Trap helped to bring along the ESRB, right? Whether or not that's still a relevant thing or not, it was still something that happened. One of the things that often slips my mind when that even gets brought up is that the fact that Night Trap was even part of those hearings. Because personally, when I think back to that, I guess that historic decision, I think of Mortal Kombat.
Yeah,
especially now with more context, of more personal context for myself. Now that I finally played Night Trap, now that I know what it really is, and no matter how goofy and dated Mortal Kombat looks now, objectively is entirely more violent than anything in Night Trap. So,
yeah, and also, like the third game that they were there with was Lethal Enforcers, which was not very violent either. I mean,
yeah.
Besides the fact he used, like,
so I think like in that way, I think Mortal Kombat has more to lend to that legacy, which that's an entirely other episode of this King of Games. So I'm not even going to go there.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, it's in this tournament.
But like Night Trap is similar to Mega Man 5 in that it isn't, we talked about the development and everything, but the game itself isn't doing anything entirely revolutionary. We talked about FMV games existed, as early as 1983. And, in Mega Man's case, there were 4 other games in the series before it. Again, in favor of Night Trap, it was coming to a home console, so, I give it a nod towards that as well. But FMV games have always kind of seemed like a novelty to me. They seem like those like cheap games you would see in like a gift shop next to some yo-yos that have like a Bible verse on it or something that's like completely out of context. Like they aren't really video games per se. They are and they aren't.
Right. They're designed just to sell it to you in the store, and then once you get home, you're like, oh.
And to be fair, developers are still making FMV games, right? You don't really hear about them a lot, or maybe I'm probably just hanging out with the wrong people.
But there's quite a few.
Oh, absolutely.
There's actually it's surprising, and I didn't even know about this like world of FMV games.
I mean, the only one in
recently.
One in recent memory that I can even think of is The Quiet Man, and that absolutely bombed. And
there have been others. Erica was a big release. It was even published by Sony, and it was co-developed by London Studios. So, and there's a Russian studio that's just dedicated to making FMV games, and they've released quite a few games. So yeah, I mean, it's actually, I wouldn't say it's thriving, but there's definitely a market for it.
Yeah, see, I'm hanging out with all the wrong people apparently.
You really are, Keith.
Oh, you're probably not missing out much, honestly.
So as I look at the Mega Man franchise as a whole, I think that's where I can safely say the output from Capcom here has been far and away better than probably most FMV games. And that's when you factor in like the X series or the Zero series, Mega Man Legends, and even like the weird RPG internet games for Gen Z on the GBA. Many of those titles are insanely successful, and there's people out there that still want a new Mega Man game, in any one of those series, even a mainline numbered entry, right? And I just think those FMV games and Night Trap itself is an incredibly niche thing, and I know that it has its cult following, including, all the collectors out there with all the great bundles that are being made available and everything. But I'm always coming back to the fact that neither of these games are the beginning of really anything. Is the success of Mega Man 5 itself responsible for all the successful sequels and spin-offs and clones? Not really. Is Night Trap responsible for FMV games still being around? Maybe?
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I could see that a little bit.
I'm just...
You can't phone a friend, Keith. You gotta make a call. Come on.
Nobody... I don't think anybody is clamoring for a Night Trap 2. Right?
No. Except for, the director of the original.
People are still clamoring for a new Mega Man.
Yes.
So
100%.
I am very hesitantly sliding a ticket to Mega Man 5 under the table. I think it just barely slips by on the notoriety of the franchise as a whole.
Yeah, when it comes down to that, I mean, it's no contest if you just think about, the impact of Mega Man in that it continues to have.
I feel like I need to take a shower.
So I guess I gotta act as a tiebreaker because we have a 1-1 situation here. Corey, you pick Night Trap. Keith, you pick Mega Man. And really, I think this really puts to the test, does bad publicity count as good publicity? And does no publicity count as bad publicity? If that makes any sense. So what I'm going to do is just basically go back to the fact that, Mega Man 5 as a game, yes, it's kind of one of the unheralded, unknown entries, but it still forms part of the legacy. It still forms part of the original 6 games. It's part of the legacy collection, for God's sake. And when you take a look at Mega Man in December of 1992, Mega Man 5, and you compare it to a game released on the NES for the original Black Label releases in 1985, the leap is just mind-blowing. It's just like Capcom was really at the top of its game when they were making these games. Could you say that they were running a little bit out of steam? Sure. Was it the most memorable game? I mean, besides Vietnam, not really. But I do still think that Mega Man 5 was just leaps and bounds beyond almost anything that you could get, pre-1988 for the NES. And in fact, I would say it was better than a lot of the games that were coming out on the SNES at the time. So I do think that it has a lot going for it in terms of standing up on its own 2 feet and forming part of that legacy. Because let's just flip it. If Mega Man 5 was a bad game, and you had the first 6 Mega Man games, and there was just this one outlier, and that outlier is a bad game, we would have a completely different narrative about what Mega Man stands for and those original 6 games. So the fact that it's not a weak entry, the fact that it's actually quite good, that it's probably, in my opinion, it's better than 4 and probably better than 6, I think deserves a lot of merit. Whereas with Night Trap, really, it's the bad publicity that kind of really goes into play. It's really, the fact that it became so renowned as one of the worst games of all time or one of the most controversial games of all time. That kind of media craze is really what's feeding, its legacy. But like he says, I wouldn't necessarily say that means that Night Trap was the reason why there are more FMV games. I do think, from my perspective, Night Trap has, it's part of that legacy. I do think that we have FMV games in part because of Night Trap. And the fact that we have the ESRB is also a kind of feather in its cap. But ultimately, I think that the Mega Man legacy is very strong, and so I think I'm going to give it to Mega Man 5. I'm not going to dither too much on that. So I think that means that Mega Man takes this round. So that's 2-1, but Night Trap is not out yet. And remember, even if a game wins all 3 or all 4, that still doesn't mean the game will advance, because that's crazy and that's the way we like it. So let's go to the final criteria before we move on to the final verdict. And the final criteria being, of course, which of these games would we rather play? So, Keith, since you went on this big, eloquent diatribe, I'm going to start with you.
Well, thank you for saying that was eloquent. I'm going to keep it simple here. I'm not really going to beat around the bush. I would rather play Mega Man 5. There's no game in this tournament coming up that I wouldn't pick over Night Trap. And that's including that one. And I think anybody in the Discord chat would know which one I am talking about.
I know.
Yeah, Night Trap. So it's funny because prior to being selected for this matchup, I actually didn't know how much people actually hated Night Trap. I actually did not know what people felt about the game. I didn't even realize that it would be on some people's worst game of all time list. So that was kind of surprising to me, honestly. But having played it for the show, it totally makes sense. And I know the remastered and the re-release versions have some quality of life aspects added to it that they just could not do on the Sega CD version. But we're not talking about that version, unfortunately. Night Trap is just...
Yeah, you have to imagine as if you were playing it on a Sega CD right now, with all the pixelated glory that it entails.
And the static images of the rooms that you can't see, so you don't really even know if there's anything going on in the next room, so you're just missing a lot of context. Yeah, Night Trap is more of a game that should be watched and not played, in my opinion. Whereas,
That's
Mega
totally
Man
fair.
5, you know exactly what you're getting. You're getting 8 main bosses, a set of challenging levels, a boss rush at the end, and then credits.
Yeah.
I finished Mega Man 5. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't finish Night Trap. I didn't enjoy it, and I'm probably never going to play it again. So it's Mega Man 5.
All right, Corey, what are you going with?
Well, if I was just gonna sit down and play one of the two games right now, I would definitely go with Mega Man 5. Like, I wouldn't. I have played enough Night Trap, I think, at this point that I feel very uninspired to play the game any further than the theme song part, where they all sing the theme
Which is
song,
like 5
and they
minutes
all
in,
go.
so...
Yeah, but I play it so I can hear that and hear the girls go. And I think that I'm always up for a good Mega Man game, and I think that I would have no problem just I would take Mega Man 5 any day of the week.
All right, so that's
that I'd rather play.
So that's Mega Man for Corey. So I guess it's up to me to determine whether it's a sweep. I don't know if there's much suspense around this. But let me take a different tack to this. Let me take a different approach to this. I think that if it was a Saturday night and I had a number of beers with friends, and
you are having a
party, and anyone said, "Hey guys, you remember that Sega CD game? I used to remember it from commercials back in the day, or I think it came out on the news." And I'm like, "Do I have the game for you?" If it was in that context, Night Trap all the freaking way. Even though it would probably last 10 minutes before we said this is awful.
Well, look at Ozzy and all his friends that he can have a party with.
Yeah, and then I can bring in the augers. But no, it's considering that I have no friends and that I don't throw Saturday night parties because I have a baby. I'm gonna go with Mega Man. Honestly, the gameplay is so good. The level design is still great. I think the biggest knock on Mega Man 5 is that the boss weapons are not that good compared to the other games. They don't seem as as ingenuous. They don't seem as effective. But really, to me, that's kind of a small flaw for the game. But I still think it's a very good one, and it's also very accessible. And I feel like even me, who sucks at video games, can jump into it and probably one day beat it without fucking rewinding. So, yeah, I would totally go Mega Man. But again, if I was on a Saturday night and I had friends over and I was drinking beers and someone brought it up, it will be Night Trap all the way. So Night Trap in my heart, Mega Man in my head. But no, that means Mega Man takes it. That's a clean sweep. So that means that it's 3-1 for Mega Man. But that doesn't mean that it's over yet, because now we have to render the final verdict. And I'm going to go first, because I, as the host, don't want to make the final decision. So let's... we've already said it. I think that Night Trap has a lot of merit. I think Night Trap deserves a better rap than it got for over 2 decades. And I really applaud people like Corey for bringing the narrative around for Night Trap. I do think that when you talk to the people that made this game, you can tell that they had a vision and they worked within the limitations of a medium that wasn't well understood. And they really tried to do something different. And it was very experimental. And it does deserve a lot of credit. And really, we cannot ignore that the FMV craze existed for a reason. And that reason was that it really did feel like a leap forward in terms of technology. It never panned out because we eventually saw the limitations of it. But I do think that Night Trap really is a touch point in terms of the development of video games. And I think that no history of video games would be complete without not only FMV games, but I think Night Trap in and of itself. With that said, I think that King of Games really is about, which is the better game, which is the game that left the strongest impact. And even for as much of a legacy as Night Trap may hold, I still do think that Mega Man is the better game. It is the game that I would rather play. It is the game that I would think 99% of the global population would probably prefer to play. So I would probably say I'm going to go with Mega Man. But again, on a Saturday night with friends over beers, Night Trap all the way. But for now, because this is King of Games, I'm going to go with Mega Man. So Corey, I'm going to go with you.
It's hard to argue that. And I would say that Mega Man 5 is the better game. But, if I was going to pick Night Trap, it's just because of my history with it. It's like my personal.
We will start looking into whether anyone paid you, basically, Corey.
Exactly. And it's just, I love that I was able to, be a part of Night Trap history. But if I was not me, and I was faced with these two games, there'd be no competition. Especially now looking at Night Trap, thinking that, hey, it's just there's you could just watch all the good parts on YouTube if you wanted to. Anyways,
and it would probably be 30 something minutes of your day.
Yeah. Exactly. And there's a reason that there's a cut of Night Trap on YouTube. It's just the Night Trap the movie, where you can just watch it without any of the gameplay. And is that arguably the better experience? Maybe. You don't have to feel stressed out, and you can just kind of watch what's going on and follow the story a little bit. But I would definitely I would probably pick Mega Man 5. It's just
probably, or are you picking Mega Man 5?
I'm picking Mega Man 5. But I have to remove myself from my personal history and personal experience from it.
And I commend you for that.
From Night Trap.
I commend you for that. So that means Night Trap advances, but it's not over yet. Keith, tell us, are we taking out the broom and showing Night Trap the way out?
So
on the stickier side of the broom, or are we gently closing the door behind it and waving it adieu?
You might say that there's a auger waiting just outside the podcasting room to take it on out. So there's a saying that I have on my show that I took from a response I got from a listener that goes something like, just because it's a classic doesn't mean you have to like it. And there are many games that I've played that are considered classics that I would say are incredibly influential to the culture and the landscape of gaming, but they are not required homework. And in a weird way, Night Trap and Mega Man 5 both fit that criteria.
I don't know why you're bringing up Ultima 4, Keith. I mean, come on, man. That's just rude.
But I think Night Trap fits that mold more so because its cultural relevance is misguided due to the misjudgment of a few old white guys and a bunch of unreasonable parents. I will say, like, when it came to voting for what games should be included in this final lineup, I ranked Night Trap relatively high just so that it could get here and so that we can talk about it and just how it is kind of this oddity that became a target for bored housewives and subsequently helped along the ratings board, for the software from there on out. But it's definitely one of those classics that can be admired from afar.
Or from YouTube.
Yes, without having to actually play it. And I know, Corey, I know you have connections, and I don't know if anybody who's worked on the game is going to be listening to this, but with all due respect...
Or if they will kill you.
We are voting for the best video game of 92, and Night Trap is like a video game with an asterisk. It's a cool experiment, and it's neat for its time, right? But then we got Mega Man 5, which by itself didn't really do anything to change the landscape of gaming either. It was just an iteration of what came before, a slightly better version of 4 previous games. Which, again, that's to a degree. Night Trap is iterative as well to a certain degree. But Mega Man 5 was ignored due to oversaturation. There's a new console generation. It was like the wrong game at the wrong time. But looking back at it, there really isn't anything wrong with Mega Man. Or Mega Man 5 specifically. No. At least I've never had any real complaints. I think...
it's just a solid game.
The worst thing you can say about Mega Man 5 is that it's just another NES Mega Man game. And that is its worst offense. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna give it to Mega Man 5 here.
All right. Well, that's a clean sweep. And that means that Mega Man 5 will advance to the round of 8. But I do think that talking about Night Trap has been a good exercise. For sure. I think I think it really makes the tournament a lot more well-rounded.
I'm totally happy we gave Night Trap its due. Like, it got its representation.
I feel like King of Games will be the final cherry on top in the comeback story that has been Night Trap, even if it didn't advance. So I thank Corey for contributing to that legacy. Even though it didn't get a single vote in the final game to advance, it did get one of the rounds. It did take one of the rounds. So there's that. And listen, at the very least, I would say 75% of this episode was about Night Trap, and then 25% was about Mega Man, which kind of says something.
It really does, yeah.
Yeah. So, Mega Man, I don't think you're going to have as easy a match next time because, again, you're Mega Man 5 and not Mega Man 3 or Mega Man 2. Or
Mega Man 1.
Or Mega Man 1 if you're Corey. But it's exciting. I'm looking forward to what comes next. I'm looking forward to the next round. And hopefully we're going to make the right decision to see who comes out on top. But before we head off, I don't have anything to plug. So that means you, Keith, and you, Corey, have all the space, to be able to plug yourselves. So, Corey, where can we find you?
You could find me on the YouTube channel My Life in Gaming. Sometimes we post on Twitter at My Life in Gaming. Sometimes I post photos on Instagram at My Life in Gaming. And I just signed up for TikTok, and I told my daughter, like, do you want to do this? I can't do it. So right now it's just an empty TikTok page that says don't expect much.
Well, let me plug you as well. Corey and Try have been my go-to source for all things retro fidelity. Both you guys and Retro RGB Bob, you guys were the ones that got me into buying a PVM. So you guys have had an influence that maybe you don't see right away, but you're spending other people's money. I just want to let you know that.
Yeah.
And you're making me a snob, which I don't like. Because I'm like, I can't see all the pixel perfect, resolution.
We make it really fun not to play the games that you have instead of just like fiddling around with them.
I just talk about which game has the best quality version and which monitor is best to use on which S-Video or RGB modded, console. So thank you, Corey. You've made me into a miserable person. But no, seriously, My Life in Gaming is one of the best produced shows out there on YouTube. So definitely check them out.
I'll second that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's an honor to be on the same pod as you, Corey. So I was glad that you let this dilettante steer the way today. So, Keith, where can we find you, brother?
Well, before I basically jerk myself off, I just want to say that I am very honored to even be included on the King of Games this year. I am a huge and longtime fan of many of the panelists that we'll be hearing from later, and that includes both of you guys. And I've talked to you before, Ozzy, on Discord. This is my first time formally meeting you as well. So, hey, hi. And,
hey there.
And of course, Corey, what hasn't been said about My Life in Gaming already. So I'm very happy that somebody forced you to sit on mic with me.
Chris will release his kits right after this show. So I just gotta give him the green light after this.
I just hope I didn't disappoint anybody too terribly. That goes for the listeners as well. So.
No, this is super, super fun.
But at the very least, we got to shoot the shit for an hour and a half.
Right.
So
if you want to hear more from me, I host the Main Quest podcast. You can find that on any podcatcher of your choice. If you cannot find me, why don't you shoot me a message on the socials? You can send me a message on Twitter. That's at Main Quest Pod. And you can also shoot me a message on Instagram, and that's the Main Quest.
And Keith has very bad opinions on Bloodborne. So you could kind of say that he's the Dark Souls of podcasters.
There you go. You know what? I'm going to run with
that. So there you go. Again, just because I don't have my own show to plug because the Region Free Gamers are dead. But listen to the back catalog if you're into that. Definitely listen to Retro Hangover podcast because they're the ones that have run with this and have carried on the legacy of the King of Games. The only reason why we are doing the King of Games again is because Retro Hangover liked it enough to keep running along with this idea that we at the Region Free Gamers came upon and didn't think would stick, but so lo and behold it has. So definitely go listen to Chris and Shane the Dick Dragon over on the Retro Hangovers podcast. So with that said, congratulations to Mega Man 5. You advance. You're going to get your diploma later on, and then get beat into a bloody pulp in the next round. And Night Trap, it was a good showing. It was good to talk about you. It definitely was a very enlightening discussion about the merits and the demerits of Night Trap. And definitely until the next round. I don't have any pithy remarks about what you should be playing with, as Chris does. So we'll see you on the next round of 8 of the King of Games 92. See ya.